Imagine a war where thousands die, not for a crown, not for gold, but for a wooden bucket. It sounds absurd, but this is the true story of the War of the Bucket, one of history's strangest conflicts. Our tale begins in 1325 in Italy, a land divided into rival city-states, each with its own rulers, laws, and armies. These cities were like feuding siblings, always looking for a reason to fight. The main players? Modena and Bologna, neighbors but bitter enemies for centuries. They'd fought over land, trade, and pride, always ready for the next spark to ignite a war. And that spark, unbelievably, was a bucket. Yes, a simple wooden bucket, the kind used to fetch water from a well. This is a story of pride, rivalry, and how something small can lead to something huge and deadly. Modena and Bologna were like two angry dogs fighting over a bone, each unwilling to back down. All it took was one petty act to set off a chain reaction. So get ready for a tale that's both ridiculous and tragic. You'll meet sneaky soldiers, furious politicians, in a battle so fierce it's remembered centuries later. And you'll discover why, even today, a bucket is a symbol of one of history's most bizarre wars. This is the War of the Oaken Bucket, a history lesson you won't soon forget. Let's dive in. In medieval Italy, city-states were always on edge, their pride easily wounded. Modena and Bologna's rivalry was legendary, fueled by old grudges and constant competition. Their hatred simmered, waiting for any excuse to boil over. And when it did, the consequences were deadly. The War of the Bucket is proof that sometimes the reasons for war are anything but noble. Sometimes they're just plain silly. But the results? All too real. So, how did a bucket become the cause of so much bloodshed? Let's find out. To understand the chaos over a bucket, you need to know about the Guelphs and the Ghibellines. These were two powerful factions that split Italy in two. Guelphs backed the Pope, Ghibellines the Holy Roman Emperor. Every city had to pick a side, and the rivalry was fierce. Bologna was a proud Guelph city, loyal to the Pope. Modena was Ghibelline, siding with the Emperor. This wasn't just politics, it was personal, dividing families and friends. Even city walls showed their allegiance. Guelphs built square-topped battlements, Ghibellines used swallowtail notches. The hatred ran deep. To each side the other was not just a rival but an enemy to be crushed. So when Modena stole Bologna's bucket, it wasn't just a prank, it was a declaration of war. The bucket became a symbol of everything the two cities despised about each other. For Modena, stealing it was a way to say, "We're better than you." For Bologna, losing it was a humiliation they couldn't ignore. The stage was set for a showdown. In this world, even a bucket could tip the balance. The rivalry was about more than water or wood, it was about pride, power, and centuries of bad blood. The bucket was just the latest insult in a long, bitter feud, and neither side was willing to back down. The lines were drawn, and war was inevitable. All it took was one small act to unleash chaos. The War of the Bucket was about to begin, and it would be anything but silly for those involved. Let's see how a midnight prank turned deadly. Here's how the Great Bucket Robbery unfolded. On a dark night in 1325, Modenese soldiers slipped into Bologna. They didn't attack or burn buildings, they went straight to the city's main well. There, they stole the public oaken bucket, a symbol of Bologna's pride. By morning, the city was in uproar. The missing bucket wasn't just a loss, it was a public insult. Everyone knew who was to blame: Modena. The theft was a calculated act designed to provoke. Modena's soldiers returned home as heroes, parading the bucket like a trophy. Bologna was humiliated, their honor in tatters. The prank had worked, but it had also crossed a line. The people of Bologna demanded revenge. Modena's leaders reveled in their victory, refusing to return the bucket. The stage was set for war. What started as a joke would soon turn deadly serious. The bucket, once a simple tool, was now a symbol of defiance. Bologna's leaders had a choice: accept the insult, or fight back. They chose war. The armies began to gather, all because of a stolen bucket. The consequences would be catastrophic. The War of the Bucket was about to erupt. Bologna's leaders demanded the bucket's return. Modena refused, flaunting their prize for all to see. For Bologna, this was the final insult. Their honor was at stake, and they couldn't back down. War was declared. Bologna rallied its allies, raising a massive army. Modena prepared to defend itself, determined to keep the bucket. The conflict was no longer about wood and rope, it was about pride and reputation. Both sides saw the bucket as a symbol of victory or defeat. The armies marched, and the fate of 2 cities hung in the balance. The war would be brutal, and many would pay the price. All for a bucket, but for these cities, it was about much more. The lines were drawn, and there was no turning back. The War of the Bucket had begun. Soon, thousands would clash on the fields outside Modena. The battle would decide the fate of the bucket, and the pride of 2 cities. The world would remember this war, not for its cause but for its absurdity. Next, the bloody showdown at Zappolino. Bologna assembled a massive army, over 30,000 strong. Modena, outnumbered, scraped together just 7,000. The 2 forces met at Zappolino, a hill between the cities. Bologna's army was disorganized, spread thin across the slope. Modena's smaller force held the high ground, ready and disciplined. As the sun set, Modena charged downhill, smashing into Bologna's lines. The battle was short and savage. Bologna's army collapsed, their leaders captured, their soldiers fleeing. Modena showed no mercy, chasing down the defeated. By nightfall, 2,000 lay dead. Against all odds, Modena had won. The bucket was theirs, and so was the glory. The war's outcome was decided in a single, brutal afternoon. But the story of the bucket was far from over. Modena's victory was complete. They paraded the bucket through the city, celebrating their triumph. The bucket became a sacred symbol, displayed in Modena's cathedral for all to see. For centuries it was a source of pride for Modena, and shame for Bologna. Tourists came from far and wide to see the legendary bucket. The war ended, but the bucket remained. Today, a replica hangs in Modena's bell tower. The original is kept safe in a museum. For over 600 years, the bucket has been Modena's most famous treasure. It stands as a reminder of a time when pride led to war, and a simple prank changed history. The bucket is more than wood and iron. It's a symbol of rivalry, victory, and the absurdity of war. The most famous bucket in the world. But was it really just about the bucket? Was the war really about a bucket? Yes and no. The theft was the spark, but the real cause was centuries of rivalry and hatred. Modena and Bologna were already primed for conflict. The bucket was just the excuse. The war teaches us that big conflicts often start with small, silly triggers. Pride and stubbornness can turn minor insults into major disasters. The War of the Bucket is a warning. Never underestimate the danger of petty squabbles. Look beyond the trigger to understand the real reasons for conflict. Sometimes history is both tragedy and comedy, and sometimes the line between the two is as thin as the handle of a wooden bucket. The War of the Bucket reminds us that even the silliest reasons can have deadly consequences. It's a story worth remembering, because sometimes the smallest things make the biggest impact, and that's the true lesson of the world's silliest war.